Does North Korea's dictator really want to give up his nukes? And what will happen when Kim Jong-un and President Trump meet face to face? Meanwhile, back in Washington, the White House has been mired in conflict, and the president says he likes it that way.
But I like watching it, I like seeing it, and I think it's the best way to go.
We'll show you where it's all heading, from tariffs on steel and aluminum to what it means for us. We'll sit down with Senator Marco Rubio, but we'll start with big changes in state government, including new gun restrictions and the plan to stay on daylight saving time forever. This is Money, Power, and Politics. Once again, state lawmakers failed to do the one thing they were required to do on time. Their session is carrying into overtime this weekend because they could not pass a budget on time. But that lapse pales in comparison to prior years, like the year they broke the law by illegally rigging districts to serve their own self-interest, or the other year that they also broke the law by illegally rigging districts to serve their own self-interest, or the year they broke the law by quitting and going home early.
Obviously, we're at an impasse.
This year will be long remembered as the year they either did too much or the year they did too little, depending on your own point of view. Republican leaders this year led the push for more gun restrictions over the NRA's objections. They passed a controversial plan to arm some school staffers, and they spent an extra $400 million on school safety, while Senator Kelly Stargel touched off some strong reaction by saying none of those things would stop school shooters more than offering thoughts and prayers.
In my opinion, the one thing that will actually change this the most is the one thing that has become fighting words, which is to say thoughts and prayers.
But while the debate over school safety pulled focus, state lawmakers also made some other big changes in that final week, or what was supposed to be a final week of session. And in tonight's We the People, we'll take a closer look at what they changed for ailing first responders.
Hey, listen, get back, all the way back.
When officers walked into a nightclub called Pulse, they had no idea.
Go! Come to me!
That they were walking into a massacre that was a long way from finished. But this story is mostly about a hero officer who saved lives.
My name is Officer Omar Delgado.
Angel Colon was shot and bleeding out when Omar Delgado saw him move and saved him.
I need a big hug from you, man. I appreciate it. So glad you're alive, man.
But after they celebrated Delgado's heroics, the rest of his story did not play out the way any of us would want.
I'm someone who could lose it all, you know?
And it did not end the way we were told.
And they lied to the people.
We'll start with the call. Active shooter inside Club Pulse. Delgado worked for Eatonville Police just north of Orlando, but he got there in no time.
People coming in and out of 7-Eleven, traffic was still flowing, and I'm like, okay, I'm obviously in the wrong place. And then you can just hear the assault rifle literally just going to town.
And at that point, he walked in through a patio door.
I see all these people lying on the floor, and I yell, get up, get up, get up, you know, like the police are here.
They weren't moving, and that's when he knew it was too late and that the killer was still in there hiding somewhere.
And then I grab my flashlight and I'm scanning the room, and you know, that's when you see a couple people start moving, you know, and we just started pulling people out.
Is that when you pulled Angel out?
That is when I pulled Angel out, and it was so quiet. You can hear a pin drop.
Outside the club, beyond the blaze of lights, the news was spreading around the world.
And it was just quiet, and then all of a sudden the phones start ringing.
The phones?
Yeah, they just kept ringing and ringing and ringing. And you would look down and you would see the caller IDs, you would see mom calling.
They later found the killer in the bathroom, and that was the end of him. But it left 49 lives, 49 families destroyed, and so many others changed, including first responders like Omar, who still can't shake it. And you're reliving that every night?
Every single night since June 12th.
To him, those phones are still ringing.
You can just hear that damn phone ring for hours and hours and hours.
And to him, the killer is still firing that rifle.
And it was da 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 da.
He relives this every night in his sleep until he wakes up screaming.
That's all I yell out. Get down, get down, get down, and then I wake up, you know, I'm screaming and I'm sweating.
And it plays out again in flashbacks while he's awake.
All I really wanted to do, Craig, was just stay in my room.
This all came to a head at a routine traffic stop.
I told a lady that I was emotionally disturbed. She was looking at me. I said, "What are you looking at?" You know, she said, "Oh God, I can look at you anytime I want." I said, "Well, don't look at me because I'm emotionally disturbed."
The city of Eatonville decided it can't have a policeman who's disturbed, and under state law, couldn't give him paid leave. So after thanking him for saving lives, they fired him.
You know, what happens when I can't pay my mortgage? You know, where do I go?
We're friends.
Now, firing a life-saving hero because he's suffering post-traumatic stress just before his pension vest may sound pretty low, but the mayor said they'd hook him up.
Corporal Delgado will receive his full pension benefits regardless of his less than 10 years of employment.
And that brings us to the part that did not end as we were told.
Are you getting your pension now?
No.
No, because that's still up to a board to decide. And Delgado has been out of work for months.
When they need help, they call us. But now that we need help, who do we call?
And Omar Delgado's not alone.
You asked us to do what we do, you know? And we do it, and we see it. And then we try to live our normal lives.
Orlando officer Jerry Reeland also responded to the Pulse massacre. His job was to recover the dead, and now he can't recover from what he saw. Burned through his sick time, got no paid leave, and lost his job.
But I also need my family to be taken care of.
And far beyond the Pulse massacre, we're finding first responders across the state who have the same problem.
Why is physical injury treated any different than a mental injury?
Because Florida allows first responders to get paid leave for physical injuries on the job, but not PTSD.
In fact, if he had sprained his ankle or even got a cut, he would have been covered.
Omar Delgado says we're either kicking first responders to the curb when they're sick.
How can you put a price on someone's life?
Or we're pushing them to keep going, making life and death decisions when they're sick.
Would they make the right decision? Who knows?
Well, the legislature responded by passing a bill. The changes sponsored by Representative Matt Wilhite allow first responders with PTSD incurred on the job to get paid leave starting this October. Well, in just a few minutes, we're going to break down some other interesting bills that have passed in the legislature past couple of days. But first, we'll bring in Senator Marco Rubio because we also have some big changes to talk about in Washington. President Trump wants to drive up the price of steel and aluminum we get from other countries, and he certainly has the power to do it. The president is trying to help companies that make steel and aluminum in our country. He tweeted that in the past 25 years, America has lost more than 55,000 factories and 6 million manufacturing jobs. Well, supporters say consumers will barely notice the higher price of exported steel and aluminum, maybe an extra cent or two on a canned drink or an extra $40 to $50 on buying a car. But opponents fear that other countries will hit back. For example, the European Union says it will retaliate by driving up the costs on stuff our companies sell to Europe. Things like bed linens, tobacco, motorcycles, fruit, including Florida orange juice. And while that is playing out, Vladimir Putin has dropped any pretense of charm on his end. He claims Russia has developed a nuclear missile that we cannot shoot down. And he's boasting about it with animation showing nuclear warheads pounding, of all places, Tampa Bay and Central Florida. But while Putin is rattling his saber, Kim Jong-un offered an olive branch. In a striking turn of events, he first offered to freeze North Korea's nuclear weapons tests. Then, President Trump agreed to meet with him face-to-face after Kim Jong-un said he'd consider getting rid of his nukes.
So I think it was really, what changed was his posture in a fairly dramatic way that, in all honesty, came as a little bit of a surprise to us.
And while a depleted roster of diplomats at the State Department focus on those challenges, Congress, meanwhile, may follow the Florida legislature's lead on guns and school safety.
We aren't going anywhere. We are more energized than ever.
Our federal lawmakers are listening to survivors and loved ones of students who died in school shootings all across the nation.
On December 14th, 2012, I got him a hot chocolate at Starbucks and dropped him off at school. I never saw him alive again.
And with that, Florida Senators Bill Nelson and Marco Rubio are trying to pump more federal money into identifying threats in school. And they want to improve the background check system, among other things.
Given the environment around here and the sway of the NRA, there are certain things that are just simply not going to be passed. Let's get what we can
to prevent dangerous individuals from being able to take the next step and actually take the lives of innocent people.
Before we bring in Senator Rubio here on set, I sat down with him on Friday after the president agreed to meet with North Korea's dictator. And here is Rubio's take first on what Kim Jong-un is up to. Is the president's decision to meet face-to-face with Kim Jong-un a good idea?
Well, this president was elected on his willingness to do things that traditional politicians in America do not do. Now, I want to be careful here because there's only one of two things happening here. Either Kim Jong-un feels real fear at a military strike and real pressure internally because of sanctions and is desperate to figure out a way forward, or Kim Jong-un is trying to set up a scenario where he can argue to the world, look, I've been very reasonable, I've been willing to meet with the president, but he's not willing to remove American troops from South Korea, so therefore the talks have fallen apart. And he would do that so that the international sanctions would fall apart, so that our other countries would no longer be supportive of those sanctions and would no longer be supportive of U.S. military action. So it could be one of these two things. I tend to think it's the second, unfortunately, but I'm hopeful it's the first.
Now, coming up, we're going to dig deeper. Senator Marco Rubio will join us here in studio. We're going to shift to his approach to stopping school shootings, as well as Vladimir Putin's claims that Russia now has nukes that cannot be shot down. Well, Senator Marco Rubio, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Do you think Vladimir Putin really has a new missile that can evade missile defense systems? And if so, how should we respond?
Russia's always been a nuclear threat. They have intercontinental missiles. We've always known that. I think, let me just say, without revealing or getting into anything that would be illegal, that I think a lot of what you saw the other day was for show. He has an election, quote unquote. He wants to look smart, strong back home. And so he puts up these crazy graphics and so forth. My experience has been, and I think history teaches us, that if someone really has something like that, they don't go around bragging about it or talking about it the way they did.
Do you think he's trying to drive us into a costly arms race at a time when we're on a path to going broke, looking at what happened to the Soviet Union, how it buckled, and he's looking at Star Wars and Reagan in reverse?
Yeah, no, because I think that the intelligence community, you can't develop these sorts of things without seeing them. They have to be tested, they have to be deployed. So that's not what it is. I'm telling you, this is 95% of domestic play on his part to look strong in coming up to these elections, which he wants to win by an overwhelming margin, and he wants turnout to be high. Their biggest fear is not that Putin's not going to win the election. His biggest fear is that turnout will be low, and you can always change a vote tally, but it's hard to claim that a lot of people voted if there's not long lines. And so I think he's just trying to drive up turnout so that it makes him look even more legitimate as a democratically elected leader.
And with Putin saber-rattling with nukes, plus the nuclear threat of North Korea, you previously said you did not trust the president with the nuclear codes. Do you fully trust President Donald Trump today to be in charge of that football, the nuclear codes of this country?
Donald Trump's not going to start a nuclear war, if that's what your question is, and I don't think that's the policy of the United States to do so. Two very different threats. I mean, for North Korea, the existence of nuclear weapons is basically regime insurance. It guarantees in the mind of Kim Jong-un that he doesn't wind up like Gaddafi or he doesn't wind up like Saddam Hussein, ousted from power. And I'm not excusing it, I'm just saying that's his viewpoint. There's a lot of dangers associated with that. Russia's a very different thing. And we're not going to go to nuclear war with Russia. They have as much to lose. They'll die too. But the bigger fear long term is it's become so easy to produce these weapons and the delivery systems, long-range missiles, that they could eventually find themselves into the hands of a non-traditional actor, a terrorist group or an unstable leader like Kim Jong-un.
On gun control, the president said, take guns first, due process second. Which seemed to breach the Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, 14th Amendment. What do you think he was talking about?
Well, I think he was speaking colloquially, which is the way he speaks, and I think he was trying to drive the point that it's so important that we should be able to move on it quickly, which I agree with, but with due process. I'll be filing, I'm working with Senator Grassley, who's the chairman of Judiciary. I'm also working with Senators Blumenthal and Graham on a proposal. We're going to come up with a federal gun violence restraining order, and it will have due process. You have to have probable cause to get a temporary order to take away permits, and then a federal court will have 14 days to hold a hearing, and you'll have to prove through clear and convincing evidence that someone is a danger to themselves or to others, and then you'll be able to go in with a federal order and the marshals will be able to take all of the guns that a person has. But there'll be due process. You cannot deny a constitutional right. The Second Amendment is in the Bill of Rights. It's a constitutional right. You cannot deny it without due process. So we will do something, and it will have due process.
You had problems with the previous federal ban on assault weapons because it could be so easily evaded. Democrats in Tallahassee have a plan whereby they define assault weapons as any semi-automatic rifle. Would you be in support of or opposed?
I would oppose that. And not only would I oppose it, Chris Murphy from Connecticut, the leading gun control advocate in the U.S. Senate, is against it as well. I mean, the significant percentage of hunting rifles are semi-automatic.
You took heat in that CNN town hall, then later took heat for saying that some people were arrogant and boastful. Who were you directing those comments at when you say the vitriol
our entire
in this
political
country
class, our entire political
that
class
has infected the next generation? So you're not referring specifically to the students, the activists?
Well, everybody. I mean, just look how, forget about gun control or the gun debate for a minute. Every debate we have in America today. Look, I understand rhetorical combat in politics is a part of it. It always has been. I respect it. But then you cross a line where people hate each other. And I just don't know how you fix problems in a country where we, the people, hate each other. And that's what it's become now. You cannot even have a debate about issues because there's no debate. It's immediately the other side is evil. The right says the left are a bunch of liberal gun grabbers or a bunch of open border people who just want to flood the country and destroy it. The left says the people on the right are a bunch of racists or xenophobes or gun worshipers who don't care how many children die. When you say that about each other, people stop talking and they stop working.
The president also said a trade war can be good.
I think bad things will happen for the American economy. I'm against the abuses that exist today against U.S. manufacturers. I want to see U.S. manufacturing grow and prosper. And we got to continue to push for that by lowering regulations, by skills training, making us more competitive. The problem with this is, yeah, okay, you're going to issue tariffs. Tariffs are not paid by those countries. They're paid by the American consumer. So right now, people watching are buying things that may say made in the USA, but the aluminum or the steel, being it in a building or a product, came from somewhere else. If you raise the price of that steel or that aluminum in whatever product you're buying, if you put a tariff on it, you're going to raise the price of it. We're going to pay more. We will pay it. Businesses don't pay taxes. They pass them through in the pricing. The second thing that's going to happen is all the countries that are being hit with this tariff are going to hit us back. So in 2002, when President Bush issued tariffs, they hit Europe hit our orange juice from Florida. Had nothing to do with steel, but they hit orange juice. There will be retaliation against an unrelated industry that will hurt another part of our economy. That said, the trade imbalance needs to be worked on through the WTO, which we're members of. If we don't like the rules of the WTO, we should push to fix them. And we should also make our domestic industry more competitive so they can win the price war, not because of a trade war, but because we are more productive at a better quality and at a better price than our foreign competition.
Senator Rubio, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, we'll look into complaints from some members of Congress, claims of gross work and sleeping habits inside the Capitol, with some members allegedly walking around in their underwear. We pay our members of Congress a salary of $174,000 a year. Around half of them are millionaires, and yet some say they have trouble making ends meet. Others say they just want to save money. Either way, you have a good number, as in dozens, who sleep and live out of their offices on Capitol Hill. And some of their colleagues now say that it's gross and that it needs to stop. When politicians win seats in Congress, they discover the high cost of rent and real estate in Washington, D.C. So former Congressman Jason Chavez says around 100 or so live in their official congressional offices, and he was one of them.
I want you to know I do shower on a daily basis. I do go down to the House gym, and we have a toilet and a sink in our offices.
The practice of sleeping at work goes all the way to the top. Paul Ryan has been known to live out of the Speaker's office. But as Politico first reported, some members complained to the House Ethics Committee, claiming that it's unsanitary for lawmakers to sleep and live in the same offices where they conduct meetings throughout the day. They say they wind up seeing fellow members in their underwear, some partially nude, and that it contributes to a hostile work environment and that it's disrespectful to the cleaning crews.
Yeah, so we have a 7 to 7 rule. Staff has to leave by 7 p.m. and they can't come in before 7 a.m.
Well, House Speaker Ryan has previously said sleeping out of his office was more efficient and he was able to get more work done, serve his constituents better. You have a group of House Democrats who filed this complaint. They did that back in December. They're asking the House Ethics Committee if residing in congressional offices is in fact against the rules, to make a determination here. And they say if it's allowed, then they want the members who do it to pay taxes equal to the fair market value of an apartment in Washington, D.C. The Ethics Committee has not yet weighed in. Well, coming up after the time change this weekend, the legislature does not want us changing time in our state ever again. We'll break down the plan to keep us on daylight saving time. Well, after we just changed our clocks, the legislature passed a bill to try to make sure they don't ever change again, but this is a long way from finished. The plan to keep us on daylight saving time has to go through Congress, and Congress takes its time with everything that it does. Bet that this one will linger for a while in Congress before anything happens. That's our show. We'll see you again next week. Take care.